sunshine. Hope you're doing well. I'm gonna get everything pulled up. I wish that I had this over there. Maybe I can set it over there. Ah! Bad idea. I wonder if you can still hear me over there, though. Can you hear me? Let me speak louder. Y'all, I barely slept. Stress from this. I'm going to move that back. I'm going to move it back. I don't like it all the way over there. I feel like you can't hear me. Good morning, good morning. I'm screaming. I hope so, because my big mouth. Good morning, y'all. Listen, I know we were supposed to be doing DSS stuff this week, but your girl got blindsided by the Unabomber. Let me get everything up. Where's my other phone? There it is. It's just crazy, the whole case. You know what's even crazier is that he has a huge following. Like, where's my babe? That's the craziest part, is that I'm looking up his books. He had books. What the heck? God dang it. It's always something. I knew it. It had to be in my sweater. Toothbrush on the floor. I wanted to come early because the weather, like the sun is not up yet, and the weather is like, oh God, y'all. There we go. I got rid of that bitch. Don't worry. Don't worry. Poof be gone. Don't worry. We ain't starting that shit today. Where did my computer go now? So first of all, I done spent about 15 hours looking into this case. I've never in my life looked into anything for 15 hours. And I actually think it's been longer than that. I haven't stopped since yesterday when we got off alive. Last night I didn't even get in the bed till 1 a.m. and then I was back up at 5. This has consumed me. Completely consumed me. It's just crazy. It's a wild ass case. And I don't think that he was as crazy as people wanted to make him seem. I think that he was smarter than most. He was a very smart man. Let's start. I'm going to wait for some more people to get in here because I don't want to have to repeat myself. I don't want to have to repeat myself. Y'all know I hate repeating myself. It's a damn shame, you know. Ted Kaczynski ended up dying last year. He died in prison. And it's a shame. It's a shame for a beautiful mind to go to waste, to turn in on itself and go mad. And that's exactly what happened to Ted Kaczynski. First of all, he was born to two Polish American immigrants. And where'd my book go? That's what I was going for. I got to get all my tabs up. First of all, his manifesto is 35,000 pages. 35,000 pages. So that would take you weeks, months to get through, first of all. And we're going to go over some of that because it's just unbelievable how this man was Nostradamus. If you don't know who Nostradamus is, he was a predictor. He could tell the future. And most of Nostradamus's predictions have actually come true, which is the crazy part. Is he crazy, or is he just smarter than most and can foresee the future? That's what we're going to talk about. So Ted Kaczynski was actually born to two Polish immigrants. he was a very gifted child. He actually was so gifted that he had social problems in school. Not only did he have social problems, but he didn't have any friends because of the fact that he was so much smarter than everybody else. They singled him out. They put a target on his back. He always ate alone. He was always alone. He never had any friends. And the only time that he ever got any notoriety in school was when he actually built a pipe bomb. I found this interesting. He actually built a pipe bomb in chemistry class. And because of this, everybody thought that he was so cool for like 2 minutes. And then he went back to being weird freak Ted. And that's actually what they called him. They called him Freak. And, Ted's crimes are brutal and violent. I can think of nothing more horrific than being torn to shreds by shrapnel metal out of a bomb. It's horrific. I just want to be clear that what he did was not only wrong, but evil. But I actually want to talk about what would drive a person to commit these kinds of crimes. For those that don't know, Ted Kaczynski actually he injured 23 and killed 3 or 4 or 5, 6 more. And let me go pull it up. I still don't have my stuff up. He was the Unabomber. He murdered 3 people and injured 23 others between 1978 and 95. Now, this was a 17-year case. The FBI could not catch him because he was smarter than everybody. To start with, to say that he was smart is an understatement. This man was brilliant, 10 times more brilliant than anyone that we even have on Earth currently. Elon Musk's IQ is 155 to 160. Jordan Peterson's IQ is 147. Einstein's IQ was 160. Ted Kaczynski's IQ was 168. 168. Let me just tell you. So, he had an IQ of 167 to 168 approximately. 90 to 109 is a typical IQ for like you or me. And I've been tested. I actually tested at 109. So that's interesting. But a typical IQ is 90 to 109. An average high IQ is 110 to 119. Anything below 70 is considered disabled. And anything below 25 is severe mental retardation. So, Ted was over here sitting at 167. There's not anything between 160 and 180 is extremely gifted. Extremely gifted. That's the smartest people in the entire world. And Ted was one of those people. So to say that Ted Kaczynski was smart is an extreme understatement. The man was brilliant beyond his years. There were very few people on Earth even like him. This was not just a smart man. This was a man that was a genius. He was gifted academically. He actually skipped 5th grade through 7th grade so that he could attend Harvard at 16. And I'm over here still counting with my fingers, honey. Oh God, he was beyond gifted. He was one of the most brilliant men that ever walked this earth. And it's sad what he did to himself. Isolation, becoming a hermit, not having social interactions, in my opinion, all led to his mental health disturbances, which would lead to the murders. And he went for 17 years without being able to get caught. So he wasn't... Here's the thing. They tried to say that this man was schizophrenic. He was not schizophrenic. Go tell that to somebody that don't know anything about basic psychology. They tried to say that he was schizophrenic, that he was a paranoid schizo, that he was unaware of the killings that he was doing. He was unaware of what he was doing. In my opinion, he was not schizophrenic. So let's start with his early life. He had a pretty normal upbringing. Even though he did not fit in school, he did not fit in with his brother. He had an older brother. Even though he did not fit in with his siblings and his classmates, he ended up going to Harvard at 16. And something that I was reading about this morning is that he actually took part in some weird-ass studies back at the university. So he was a mind control test subject. Y'all, I'm so sick of websites that want you to buy their news when they don't even know how to report it properly. So he was a class of 62 at Harvard, and they did a psychiatric deconstruction by humiliating undergraduates. Hold on, it's coming up. He had a weird-ass professor at one of these schools. He not only went to Harvard, but he also went... Don't fucking piss me off. I don't understand. Is it that I downloaded too many PDFs on my computer and now it don't want to work? I'm just envisioning him building this pipe bomb in the middle of chemistry lab and nobody having a problem with it. God, was it a different time? You go into a school to build a pipe bomb now, you're going to prison for the rest of your life. It's just crazy that he was able to build this pipe bomb. And, he says that it was the only time that anybody was ever nice to him when he built this pipe bomb in school, and everybody thought that it was the coolest thing. And I'm just sitting here like, how is that even possible? But it was a different time. So he became part of a controversial and disturbing psychological experiment. Now, he was only 16 years old when they started experimenting on him. He was still a baby. And, something that was striking to me was how normal he looked at this age. Where else did he go to school? He went to 2 different schools, and I can't remember. That's not important, I guess. Harvard, and let me just read some of this. So he was impressionably young, and it was at Harvard where Kaczynski would be recruited to take part in a 3-year-long psychological experiment. I don't think that was a good idea for a 16-year-old child. So Ted would go on to later go on and say that this experiment at the university was the worst experience of his life. So I don't, I saw some where they were giving them LSD. I saw other ones where they were holding their eyes open and giving them a lot electric shock therapy. I can't get, let's just ask Google. Let's give it a go. What took place during the experiments at Harvard on Ted Kaczynski? Oh my God, y'all. Is it going to be one of them days? Any other time I need my Bluetooth to hook up, I can't get it to hook up. But let me just open my laptop and go on live, and then all of a sudden, it does what it wants. What experiments did they try on Ted Kaczynski at Harvard? Google, you ain't worth a shit. What experiments did they try on Ted Kaczynski at Harvard? Sorry. Maybe if I did it that time, so maybe I wasn't loud enough. See, and it won't tell me. It won't tell me. So this teacher, Murray, is known in the medical world as a bad doctor. Henry Murray. He tested on a lot of teens at Harvard, apparently, because I'm finding other threads for people talking about this. And the Murray experiment. Come on, computer. It was 2 streams of development that transformed Ted into the Unabomber. I don't believe it. I don't believe nothing that they have wrote in history about Ted Kaczynski. Nothing. I don't believe he was schizophrenic. I don't believe that his anger towards his own family made him become the Unabomber. Absolutely not. I don't know who's out here writing this bullshit. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I'll never believe it. I'll never believe it. The Murray experiment, containing both psychological and philosophical components, may well have turned him into the Unabomber. So let's see. Gradually, while he was immersed in his Harvard readings and in the Murray experiment, Ted began to put together a theory to explain his unhappiness and anger. Technology and science were destroying liberty and nature. There we go. Now we're getting on to something truthful. Listen, I understand that this man did bad things. And I'm probably going to be called crazy for this shit. But I really don't care. You know, I'm glad that 30 years has passed, because it's given time to see if what Ted said was going to come true. And historically, people that are ranging in the 160 to 180, they have a propensity for seeing into the future because they're so much smarter than everybody else in society. It's not rocket science to them. It's human nature. All right. Let's read and see what he did. You know, it's been really hard to find any information that is tangible. Any information. It's really, you would think the Unabomber, there's all this information. No. His early life, what he went through in school, his relationship with his parents and brother, all of that is impossible to find. And that is the stuff that matters. I don't want to read too much of this because it'll give the ending away, but it does not tell me what they were doing to him. I saw anything from LSD to electric shock therapy on a 16-year-old child through Harvard for 3 years. He was in this study. It was a human study done by this Murray. Let me just go to... So there was 21 other participants in the study. None of them ended up damn bombing people. I love how they want to blame the study that he was in on, and I have no doubt that the study that he was involved in at Harvard was inhumane and he shouldn't have been involved in it. But in my opinion, that's not what turned him into the Unabomber. His 20 years in isolation turned him into the Unabomber. His own mind drove him mad, in my opinion. Now, it says that some of these studies by this Henry Murray has something to do with inward Germany. Y'all know we was talking about them yesterday. It looks like the names of the students were kept confidential, probably only ethical And they're saying that there is nothing about these students and what happened. Off the top of my head, didn't Kenny Kesey and Charles Manson both claim to have been exposed to LSD? LSD is part of the MK Ultra funded university studies. Yes, Kesey did when he was in postgraduate writing a program at Stanford. If I remember right, he got a job at the VA hospital so he could continue to get hallucinogenic drugs from the hospital. Does this Henry guy, Henry Murray, Harvard Studies. So he was through the Department of Psychology, and he's testing on children? Like, you should know better as a psychologist. I haven't had any caffeine this morning. That tastes like ass. So, practicing psychoanalyst at the clinic, Murray directed a research program investigating the constitute elements of personality, emotions, preferences, behavioral tendencies, relational characteristics. So it looks like he was looking into human behavior, human psychology. But when did he... It would have been in the 60s because Ted quit school in 68. So this doctor, I can't... Okay, here we go. Murray was the central figure in the interdisciplinary Department of Social Relations, which was later folded into the Department of Psychology. He strongly advocated research into human personality that incorporated multiple methods to capture as many facts of an individual as possible. As both a teacher and researcher, Murray had a profound influence on his colleagues and students. He retired from Harvard in 1962. Y'all, I don't know what he did to these kids, but history will have you believe that whatever happened to Ted at school is what led him to become the Unabomber, and that is not my belief. I do think that it probably had a psychological impact on him. Clearly, he said that it was the worst experience of his life, but that would not compel someone to go on a 20-year killing spree. And, you know, the great thing is he told us why he was killing. He told us clearly why he was killing. And I'm not saying it's right, it was wrong. But there's a 35,000-page manifesto that tells us why he was killing. Someone is not going to waste their time writing out 35,000 pages. He hand-typed it, honey. He typed it. And matter of fact, something that I found interesting, the original copy of the manifesto and his computer were recently sold at auction for $20,000. So here we go. It says Murray is still considered an important research and clinician in the field of psychology, and his personality assessments remain a fundamental part of psychology evaluations to this day. However, his legacy has been tarnished somewhat by this study in which Kaczynski was one of the test subjects. In fact, the study drew a lot of negative attention in the aftermath of the Unabomber's arrest, as details of his early life emerged. After several infamous cases of human experiments gone wrong, most notably Stanley Milgram's study, in which participants were coerced into believing that they had administered fatal electrocutions to others who failed to follow their instructions. The American Psychological Association, the APA, in 1982 published detailed guidelines on how research should be conducted and ethical principles in the conduct of research with human subjects. Today, all university research excludes experiments on humans. Is that true? Is that true? Because I just feel like they're always testing. The Harvard experiment was stressful, and the stress aggravates the symptoms of schizophrenia. You guys, let me tell you something. What year was this? 1968, he left. He started his crimes from 78 till 95. This was in the advancement of technology. This is when technology was actually starting to take off and become a huge thing. The last thing they need is some man that's smarter than them out here telling society that technology is going to be the downfall of man. Okay? Let's get into it. So, I actually want to see what technologies did they have back in 1972? Video games, calculators, computers. They had computers? 1972 to 73, a prototype was developed by IBM. The ELAC 5, a large parallel processing computer, was completed in 72. The Philips VCR was invented in 72. They were also, Stanford and UCSF researchers were among the first to produce recombinant DNA molecules in 1972. Portable cassette players in the 70s. Floppy disk. Okay, I didn't know they had all of that stuff back then. I thought that they was still kicking around cans in the front yard. The first laser printer was also developed in 72. Alright, so sorry, I just want to look up how do you spell his damn name? K-A-C-Z-Y. I've done, literally I should know how to spell this by now. I can't see, I'm sorry. The sun's starting to come up and I couldn't get in parking anywhere else. There, now you know what we're talking about. First of all, when I go to find his family history with his family, I want to know what his relationship was like with his mother. I need to know what his relationship was like with his father, and that's impossible to find. This is the World Wide Web. It shouldn't be this hard, you know? Still kicking around cans. Yep, that was a whole game apparently. Theodore John Kaczynski was born in Chicago on May 22nd of 1942 to working class parents, Wanda and Theodore. We're going to call him Richard since he has the same name. Who was a sausage maker. By all accounts, they were a normal Polish-American family. Ted had a brother, and they were originally raised, something that I found interesting. The whole family was originally Catholics when they were in Chicago, but when they moved out of Chicago, they later become atheists. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but, you know. From 1st to 4th grade, ages 6 to 9, He attended elementary school, and then from 5th grade to 7th grade, he actually skipped 2 grades. Ted would always say that this held him back developmentally when it came to his social skills. He noted that skipping from 5th grade to 7th grade caused him a lot of problems, and from then on out, he was known as a freak. He was bullied, in my opinion, because he was smarter than everybody else. They called him a freak because he was so advanced. He was always placing above all of the students in his class. He was beyond brilliant. I almost wonder what would have happened if they would have took him out of school in 7th grade and placed him in college. Like, that's what he needed. The curriculum that he was doing in 7th grade, it was boring to him, and he kind of got stagnant in middle school because of the fact that he was so advanced psychologically that anything they put in front of him, he was able to do the classwork and excel at it, and it did not take him long, leaving him bored half of the time that he was in school. He actually played the trombone in the marching band and was a member of the mathematics, biology, and coin clubs. I didn't know that was a thing. Is that where you like collect books of coins? He never really had a friend, and he never had a relationship. Now, his brother would go on to get married, and ironically, his brother's wife would ultimately be the one that led to Ted getting arrested. The sun, y'all. God dang, I'm so aggravated. I gotta turn around. I can't even see. This is the 4th. Yeah, I know I need gas. Shut the fuck up. This is the 4th time I've moved this morning trying to get Wi-Fi. Let me hope I don't lose you. 4th time. Should not be this difficult. I couldn't get gas yesterday because I had to get food and laundry. So you pick your battles every day when you're as poor as I am. And I haven't been able to fill my gas tank up in 2 weeks, so it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. I haven't had $100 to fill the gas tank up in over 2 weeks, so it doesn't really matter. All right. So something that I noticed was that, back to his wife. His brother would get married, and ultimately Ted would get busted because the wife recognized Ted's writing. And once again, Elon Musk only has an IQ of 155 to 160. Einstein had an IQ of 160. Ted Kaczynski, 167. And when I went to look, it said that anything between 160 and 180 are the smartest people in the world, and they're extremely gifted. And there's not many of those. He struggled in school because of the fact that he was gifted. He wasn't popular. They called him freak. They bullied him. And Ted himself claimed that skipping from the 5th grade to the 7th grade stunted his social skills and put a target on his back. And I believe that because anything that's slightly weird, children, society is cruel. Children can be even crueler. And, anything that is out of the norm is going to be viewed as, a freak. Because unfortunately, that's just the way that people raise their children. Lack of empathy, no compassion. Once again, he built this pipe bomb. I still don't understand how they even could have done that in chemistry. And he said that was the only time that he got any notoriety, and it wasn't everlasting. He built a pipe bomb, and all of the kids thought that it was really cool. And I'm just sitting here like, wow, you could do that back in the 1950s? Apparently so. Apparently so. Who thought that was a good idea? to build bombs in school, in the chemistry lab. Maybe that's why we don't have labs anymore. Like, he was completely incapable of forming friendships with anyone, much less women. That I found really interesting. Kaczynski's belief in the ideology was a key motivation for his crimes. Now, I agree with. I think they were the whole motivation, honey. I think that he had been trying to tell people for 30 years. We'll get into it. So, the ideas eventually brought them together in the manifesto. He synthesized them from ideas of several prior tech skeptical academics into his own brand of anti-tech radicalism that distinguished itself by explicit call for direct action. First of all, when I went to go see if this was true, it was not. They have proved that he did not copy anyone. There is rumors that he took bits and pieces of other people's theories and made this manifesto. That is not true. There is no scientific evidence to back that up. His manifesto was TED. That was TED. It has nothing to do with anybody that taught him anything or anything that he read. And his manifesto was all him. There was rumors that he had took pieces of other people's teachings and doctored it to his own. I do not believe that, and there is no evidence to support that. So he had these views. He felt like the world was falling away from traditionalism, normalcy, rationality. He felt like technology was going to be the downfall of man. This is interesting because, as you know, technology is actually the downfall of mankind right now, which is hilarious. This is why this is saying empathizing with a killer, because I think that Ted was so smart and so frustrated with the way that the world was headed that he lost his mind in isolation for 20 years out in the woods, and he was angry, and it's not natural. What he did is not natural. But this is what happens when you isolate. What we know from isolation and becoming a hermit and blocking yourself off from the world, if you do in fact have mental health problems, it's going to make those mental health problems worse. But not only that, if you have an unnatural obsession for building bombs and writing manifestos because you're angry at the world, then that problem is going to get worse. I do not believe that he was schizophrenic, and I never will. I feel like they said that he was schizophrenic as part of a political movement. Let's talk about his beliefs, because when I watched like some Netflix documentary or something like 3 years ago or something, and they had me believing that this man, that his beliefs were irrational. And when I went to read the manifesto, he actually was not irrational. He actually had very valid concerns, and something that was striking to me is everything that he warned us about, it's on par in his manifesto, which is scary to me. Like, I'm getting chill bumps right now. It's actually terrifying how everything he predicted is essentially came true. So let's talk a little bit about that, his beliefs. It's just crazy. So, actually, let's get into his crimes, and then we'll go back to the manifesto. The Unabomber, I take notes, and the next morning, I'm like, why did I take a note of that? Here we go. Oh, and that's another thing I forgot to tell you guys. Not only was he brilliant, he was actually a mathematical genius. Placed in a more advanced mathematical class, he soon mastered the material. He skipped the 11th grade and the 5th and 6th. He graduated at 15. He was accepted into Harvard at 15 and started at 16. The kid didn't even have a driver's license. I hope your engine blows up. What an idiot. And he was actually a mathematical prodigy. Like, so I'm trying to understand the psychology. You know, when you try to find these things out, what I don't think that most people understand is people with this type of IQ suffer from extreme high levels of empathy and compassion. And when you go and try to find anything about this, like, it's impossible to find. They've essentially wrote history the way that they want history to be viewed. And that's what upsets me, because no one who doesn't care about humanity is going to spend their entire life trying to help it. You know what I mean? Yes, he was evil. Yes, he went about this in the wrong way. But how long did he try to help humanity before the switch happened? You know what I mean? Him being a mathematical genius, he was able to see things in society that you or I would never be able to understand or foresee. Because of the fact that he was a mathematical genius, he could almost predict the future. When you are this smart, when you are this intellectually inclined, you are gifted, you can predict things because you know things that other people don't. And his manifesto, it's crazy. I felt so crazy. I still feel crazy. I'm like, how did he know? It's like watching an episode of Nostradamus on the History Channel. It's like, what? Like, so here's more on the psychological study. In the second year at Harvard, Kaczynski, Ted, participated in a study led by Harvard psychologist Henry Murray. Now, this Henry Murray is controversial. Subjects were told they would debate personal philosophy with a fellow student, and they were asked to write essays detailing their personal beliefs and aspirations. The essays were given to an anonymous individual who would confront and belittle the subject, in which Murray himself called sweeping and personally abusive attacks, using the content of the essay as ammunition. Ted spent over 200 hours as part of the study. What? This is probably why he ended up isolating you guys, because 2-3 years later, he quits university and drops out and buys a cabin in the damn woods of Montana. And we don't see him for 20 years until the FBI captures him. Think about what this says. The debate is personal philosophy. So you get a person to detail their innermost personal dialogue, and then these students hand that paper off to another student for the other student to personally attack and confront and belittle the subject that wrote the paper. What? Who thought this was a good idea? So imagine you're a right-wing extremist like me, okay? And you're, traditional, you believe in the traditional family unit, and your professor says, well, what do you believe in? What do you think life is about? And I sit down and I say, I think it's about family. I think it's about love. I think it's about God. And then that piece of paper is passed off to another student who is a leftist. We're going to get into that in a minute, because he predicted all of the leftist movement. He sure did. He sure did. I hand this to a leftist, and now that leftist is telling me that everything that I've ever been taught in my life, God is not real, my family is not real, my family are not good people. They're telling me all of my beliefs are wrong. This is what Ted apparently went through, from my understanding. It's just crazy that that was ever even a study. So Ted's lawyers later attributed his hostility towards society, towards the mind control techniques, to his participation in Murray's study. Ted stated he resented Murray and his co-workers primarily because of the invasion of his privacy he perceived as a result of their experiments. Nevertheless, he said he was quite confident that his with Professor Murray had no significance on the course of his life. I don't know if I believe that, because not too long after, you would drop out of school, buddy. I mean, and we're talking about a 16-year-old boy who's very impressionable at the time, who is expected to behave like a college student, but yet who was more brilliant than anybody else on that campus. And I'm sure that his classmates resented him for that, because they did in middle school and elementary school, and these things carry over to college, unfortunately. You would think that people grow up, but I can assure you they don't. So, Michigan, that's where it was. Michigan. In 1962, Ted enrolled at the University of Michigan, and he would only be there for, I think, less than 3 years before he drops out, where he earned his master and doctoral degrees in mathematics in 64 and 67, respectively. Michigan was not his first choice for postgrad. Oh, he was there for a while. I guess he was at Harvard for 3? I don't remember, you guys. Postgrad. Michigan was not his first choice for postgrad. He actually had applied to the University of California, Berkeley, and the University of Chicago, which both accept him, but they never offered him a teaching position or financial aid. Michigan offered him an annual grant of $2,300 and a teaching post. So I think maybe he taught for 3 years and then he left. At Michigan, Ted specialized in complex analysis, specifically geometric function theory. Y'all, let me tell you, I wanted to be able to tell you what that was. But when I went to go find out, it led me down like 14 more rabbit holes, and I was more confused than I've ever been in my life. When I say that this man was smart, okay? Professor Peter Duran said of Ted, quote, "He was an unusual person. He was not like the other grad students. He was much more focused about his work. He had a drive to discover mathematical truths." It's not enough to say he was smart. It's really sad. Another one of his teachers said that he was the best man that he had ever seen. And he was saying academically, he was the smartest student that he ever had. All right. So here's something that I don't understand, and I will never understand. For a period of several weeks in 1966, Kaczynski experienced intense sexual fantasies of being female and decided to undergo gender transition. He arranged to meet with a psychiatrist, but changed his mind in the waiting room and discussed other things instead, without disclosing his original reason for making the appointment. Afterwards, enraged, he considered killing the psychiatrist and other people whom he hated. Ted described the episode as a major turning point in his life. He recalled, "I felt so disgusted about what my uncontrolled sexual cravings had almost led me to do, and I felt humiliated. I violently hated the psychiatrist, and then there came a major turning point in my life. Like in Phoenix, I burst from the ashes of my despair into glorious new hope." First of all, I want to say that this was the 60s and 70s. There was like this sexual liberation movement taking place through college campuses. The leftist ideologies were becoming more commonplace. This was actually the start of the craziness. And I want to talk about that because October 11th, 1972, the campaign. This is a digitized copy of what was posted in 1972. Thousands of college students in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, on campuses traditionally among the most liberal in the country. So even back then, these college campuses were the most liberal colleges in the country. Ted had a problem with this. Ted had a huge problem with this, and it caused him a lot of problems. And I'm almost wondering if he went in and said that he wanted to do this sex change just to be able to see a psychiatrist. I couldn't get any answers. I couldn't find out if the clinic, it does not even tell me what clinic or where he went to. I was trying to figure out if he said this just to be seen by a doctor. I couldn't find that out. This is the only mention that he wanted to undergo gender transition and or that he had a problem with his own biological sex. This is the only mention, and it's through a Wikipedia page. He could not stand leftist policies, leftist ideas. He was against it. So I find it interesting that Wikipedia says that he had sexual fantasies of becoming a female and that he decided to go undergo gender, transitioning. But yet when he gets in this meeting, he doesn't say anything about becoming a woman. He actually starts talking about the downfall of mankind and technology being the death of everyone. I don't know. So in 1967, he decided that he was going to become a professor, and he became an acting assistant professor at the University of California, Berkeley, where he originally wanted to go to school, but they didn't give him a grant, so he decided not to go. Yeah, exactly, Kevin. Yeah, exactly. I just feel like they just be throwing stuff in there. So he was actually the youngest professor to ever be hired through Berkeley, the youngest assistant in the history of the university. By September of 1968, Ted was formally appointed as an assistant professorship, a sign that he was on track for tenure to be hired full-time by the university to teach. His teaching evaluation suggested he was not well liked by his students. He seemed uncomfortable teaching, taught straight from the textbook, and refused to answer questions. He has a borderline antisocial personality, in my opinion, and it is stemming from the fact that he cannot relate to his peers, in my opinion. And also, when you're that smart, you know things about people that they don't even know about themselves, which is scary. You can predict their behavior. Without any explanation, Ted resigned on June 30th of 1969. In a 1970 letter from the chairman of the mathematics department to Ted, the letter stated that the chairman was surprised, and this was quite out of the blue for Ted to just quit his job. He added that Ted seemed almost pathologically shy, which is crazy because remember yesterday, Ed Gein was pathologically shy. He was incapable of making any kind of personal relationships. He never even talked to a woman. Ted was the same way. The sad thing, though, is that Ted wasn't isolated like Ed. Ted wasn't, well, from what I can find, Ted wasn't abused like Ed was. But the thing that they have in common is the isolation, and we're going to get into that in a second. And I do believe that it contributed to his crimes and his beliefs. In 1996, I don't know. Listen to this. In 1996, reporters for the Los Angeles Times interviewed mathematicians about Ted's work and concluded that Ted subfield effectively ceased to exist after the 1960s, as most of its conjures had been proven. If Ted had continued to work in mathematics, he would have probably gone on to some other area. And that's what I was saying. I feel like his lack of personal relationships led him to isolate, which led him to fall into his mind, which became dark. And it's sad. He absolutely hated technology. He felt like, we're going to read some of that. Let's read some of that. And then you can just know how he felt. And tell me if he was wrong. Tell me where the lie was, because I feel crazy. So, the start of the manifesto, which would only be written when he started his crimes, when he started sending pipe bombs across the country to kill people, that's when he initially started his manifesto. This is some of it. I'm going to try to get through some of this. It was labeled The Industrial Society and Its Future. The Industrial Revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race. They have greatly increased the life expectancy of those who live in advanced countries, but they have destabilized society, have made life unfulfilling, have subjected human beings to indignities, have led to widespread psychological suffering, and have inflicted severe damage on the natural world. The continued development of technology will worsen the situation. It will certainly subject human beings to greater, I hope that's how you say that, indignities, y'all, and inflict greater damage on the natural world. It will probably lead to greater social disruption and psychological suffering, and may lead to increased physical suffering in advanced countries. Look at the mental health problems that we are having in this country from social media. Need I say more? The industrial technological system may survive, or it may break down. If it survives, it may eventually achieve a low physical and psychological suffering, but only after passing through a long and very painful time of adjustment, and only at the cost of permanently reducing human beings and many other living organisms to engineered products and mere clogs in the social machine. Am I the only one that feels crazy right now? Furthermore, if the system survives, the consequences will be inevitable. There is no way of reforming or modifying the system so as to prevent it from depriving people of dignity and autonomy. Woo! Boy! Talk about a fucking prediction. It's crazy. It's just... Here's the thing. What are the chances that he knew shit back then that they didn't know, and they wrote him off as crazy because he acted crazy? And also, let's not forget that the times that he was bombing and the time that, by the time he went to prison in 95, technology was just getting started. Like, he started having these feelings in the 60s when he was at college that technology was bad, that people were de-evolving, that people were getting dumber, that leftist policies were taking over universities. We're going to get into that in a minute. Everything that he stood for, his life's work, his life's mission, was to destroy technology. But society didn't want that. Society wanted technology. These corporations, these VHS players and damn Walkmans and color TVs, society wanted it. And corporations wanted to give it. And here's Ted, smarter than everybody else in the damn world, saying, whoa, we've got to stop this. It's going to be the downfall and kill mankind. What are the chances, There we go. Sorry, you guys, I try to pay attention, but, this is crazy. If the system breaks down, consequences will still be very painful, but the bigger system grows more disastrous, the results of its breakdown will be. So if the breakdown hold on. And this was important, so let me get it right. And I just want to be clear that if we were to lose all of our infrastructure from technology, like if we were to, like, if our computer systems were to go down right now, we would be screwed. We would have no way to run the world. Everything, it would be complete, utter chaos. Think Y2K, but it actually happened. So he says, if the system breaks down, the consequences will still be very painful, but the bigger the system grows, the more disastrous the results of its breakdown will be. So if it is to break down, it had best break down sooner rather than later. Oh my God, my whole body's filled with chill bumps. We therefore activate a revolution against the industrial system. This revolution may or may not use violence. It may be sudden, or it may be relatively gradual process spanning a few decades. And he killed for 17 years. So he hated, and he says this is not to be a political revolution. Its object will be to overthrow not governments, but the economic and technological basis of its present society. Almost everyone will agree that we live in a deeply troubled society. One of the most widespread manifestations of this craziness of our world is leftism. It's just crazy to read it because it was 50 years ago. That's crazy. Was he crazy, or was he before his time, honey? Because look at the state of the world. I mean, I do think he was crazy, but he was so smart, he went insane, in my opinion. His mind turned in on itself, and his mind and his soul become evil. I don't think he knew how to turn it around. You know what I mean? I don't think he knew how to do things the right way. He did things the wrong way. Something I found interesting is he says during the first half of the 20th century, leftism could have been practically identified with socialism. Today, the movement is fragmented, and it's not clear who can properly be called a leftist. When we speak of leftist in this article, we have in mind mainly socialist, collectivist, politically correct types, feminists, gay and disabled activists, animal rights activists. But not everyone associated with the movement is a leftist. What we are trying to get at in discussing leftism is not so much the movement or ideology as a psychological type, or rather a collection of related types. Thus we mean leftism will emerge more clearly in the course of our discussion of leftist psychology. Sorry, I'm skimming because it's a lot. 35,000 page, honey. So, this is interesting. The two psychological tendencies that underlie modern leftism we call feelings of inferiority and oversocialization. Feelings of inferiority are characteristics of modern leftism as a whole. Y'all, this was wrote 50 years ago! 50 years ago! And it fits. It fits with the leftism of today. It does. It fits with all of you crazy blue-haired people. I'm sorry, I'm not sorry. Feelings of inferiority are characteristics of modern leftism as a whole, while oversocialization is characteristics only of a certain segment of modern leftism. But this segment is highly influential. By feelings of inferiority, we mean not only inferiority feelings in the strictest sense, but a whole spectrum of related traits. Low self-esteem, feelings of powerlessness, depressive tendencies, defeatism, guilt, self-hatred. What am I always talking about? We argue that modern leftists tend to have some such feelings, possibly more or less repressed, and that these feelings are decisive in determining the direction of modern leftism. When someone interrupts as derogatory almost anything that is said about him, we conclude that he has inferiority feelings or low self-esteem. This tendency is pronounced among minority rights activists, whether or not they belong in the minorities groups who defend those rights. The leftists are hypersensitive about the words used to designate minorities and about anything that is said concerning minorities. The terms original or handicap or chick for an African or an Asian or a disabled person, they're talking about he's talking about how basic words like retard, okay, that's to classify a person. That means that that person has an IQ lower than 25. That means that they're severely mentally retarded. He's saying that it's only the left that has a problem with terminology. Isn't that crazy? 50 years ago. And look at what we have now. Look at the left with their terminology, all of their genders and their pronouns. It seems like things were not that far off from what they were 50 years ago. So he's saying that broad or chick were merely the feminine equivalents of guy or dude or fellow. The negative connotations that have been attached to the terms by activists themselves. Some animal rights activists have gone too far to reject the word pet. They didn't even want to call it a pet. What? I thought, damn, they was crazy now. They wanted to replace it with animal companion. It's not a pet. It's an animal companion. Don't you disrespect that animal companion. Jesus Christ. I guess we're not that far from where we were back then, huh? Leftist anthropologists go to great lengths to avoid saying anything about primitive people so that could be conceivable to be interpreted as negative. They want to replace the word primitive by, I don't know. We merely want to point out the hypersensitivity of the leftist anthropologies. Wow. Those who are more sensitive about political incorrectness terminology are not the average black dweller, Asian immigrant, abused woman, or disabled person, but a minority of activists, many of whom do not even belong to any oppressed group, but come from privileged strata of society. Wow. Same shit taking place, ain't it? Political correctness has a stronghold among university professors who have secured employment with comfortable salaries, and the majority of whom are heterosexual white males from middle to upper class families. Well, that's not true anymore. We had DEI. Now that we've had DEI, it's equal, baby. It's equal. It ain't just white men out here no more running things, okay? No, we got Fannie Willis down in Georgia. And Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, the Joe Biden crime family. Whoa, listen to this. I find this interesting. Feminists are desperately anxious to prove that women are just as strong and capable as men. Clearly, they are nagged by the fear that women may not be as strong and capable as men. Listen, y'all, I wish he was still alive so I could go visit him, cuz. This is what happens, though. Like, for real, when you're... This is what happens. Bless his heart. I think that, I think that he should have stayed in school and learned how to build personal relationships. I think that he would have done wonderful things in this world if he would have stayed in school. Maybe not California at Berkeley, because they were all leftists, and that's part of the reason that he believed this way, is that he was highly exposed to leftist policies and beliefs. And because of the fact that he was smarter, he could see that that would lead nowhere. And it hasn't. It hasn't. It's led to the mutilation of children. It's led to, the downfall of this country. Call me crazy too, I guess. I don't know. Leftists tend to hate anything that has an image of being strong, good, and successful. They hate America. They hate Western civilization. They hate white males. They hate rationality. So we just gonna keep calling this man crazy. Because I'm not. I think he was brilliant. I think he was a man that turned into a hermit and didn't know how to function, because I do think that there was mental health issues there, absolutely. But I don't believe he was schizophrenic. I think that he was one of the smartest people that we've ever overlooked in this fucking godforsaken place. I think he was brilliant. It's just sad that he chose to commit murder to try to get his voice heard. The reasons that leftists give for hating the West clearly do not correspond with their real motives. They say that they hate the West because it's warlike, imperialistic, I don't know if that's how you say that, sexist, ethnocentric, and so forth. But where these same faults appear, y'all, this is so small. But where these same faults appear in socialist countries or in primitive cultures, the leftist finds excuses for them, or at best, he grudgingly admits they exist. Whereas he's enthusiastically points out and often greatly exaggerates these faults where they appear in Western civilization. Thus, it's clear that these faults are not the leftist real motive for hating America and the West. He hates America and the West because they are strong and successful. Absolutely. We're talking about a group of people that lack self-esteem, self-worth, self-love. Talk to any leftist and ask them if they love themselves. I can assure you that they are not happy people. Most of them are on 5 or 6 different mental health fucking drugs, okay? No. Every person that I know, and there ain't many, that are leftists are suffering from severe mental health problems. They are on mood stabilizers and SSRIs and all kinds of different stuff together. And there was a word that keeps coming up. Primitive? Am I saying that right? I need to... Because that's what he believed. Primitive. And is it primitive? Oh my God, y'all. So, relating to an early stage of the evolutionary development of group of organisms, it just says belonging to the early stage of development, such as primitive tools. Yo, I need socks. My feet. Oh, damn it. My body's sweating, my feet are cold. I can't find my damn socks. Oh, vlog. So it's like caveman days, like the beginning, early stages of development. My feet look so better since I painted my toes. It's amazing how a coat of paint will make things just look shiny and new, won't it? It's like putting paint on a new car or a house. Boom, brand new house. What year was it built? Whatever year it was painted. Let's see here. All right. Some of these words, y'all. Sordid. So it says, modern leftist philosophy tends to dismiss reason, science, objective reality, and insist that everything is culturally relative. This was written 50 years ago. How did he know? I just want to know how he knew. They are deeply involved emotionally in their attack on truth and reality. They attack those concepts because of their own psychological needs. For one thing, their attack is an outlet for hostility, and to the extent that it is successful, it satisfies the drive for power. More importantly, the leftists hate science and rationality because they classify certain beliefs as true. Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, wrote this 50 years before I thought the leftist was even a thing. No, apparently when he went to Berkeley out in California, he was berated for having untraditional beliefs because he wasn't a freaking leftist. The same thing happened at Harvard when they were doing experiments on him. He felt like an outcast because everybody's over here having orgies. I thought that was a new thing. Apparently not. They were doing it back in college back then. And this was also the 60s and 70s. The hippie movement, the free love. Everybody was hooking up. Everybody was taking LSD. Everybody was smoking pot. Like, not everybody, but a good portion of college kids. It's just crazy that he experienced what we're experiencing in society. Oversocialization can lead to low self-esteem, a sense of powerlessness, defeatism, guilt, and one of the most important meanings and by which our society socializes children is by making them feel the shame of behavior or speech that is contrary to society's expectations. Oh my God! I can't! He's saying you either conform or you'll never fit into society. So either you do what your parents and teachers tell you, or you're going to be an outcast for your whole damn life. I can relate to what he's saying. Now, I'm not a mathematical genius, but I was a troubled kid. And from the time I started school, before I started school, I had issues because I would not conform. I was always the one in the back. Well, why did that happen? Or when did that happen? Or why did they do that? You know, and teachers don't like that because then they actually have to do their job. Yeah, and they don't want to do that. They didn't even want to do it in the 90s when I was going to school. So it's just crazy that he saw things for what they were and they wrote him off as crazy. And in my opinion, he's the most normal person that I have studied. He is the most normal person that I've studied. He got it, and he drove himself insane from it. One of the most important means by which our society socializes children is by making them feel ashamed of behaviors or speech that is contrary to society's expectations. If this is overdone, or if a particular child is especially susceptible to such feelings, he ends by feeling ashamed of himself. Moreover, the thought that the behavior of the oversocialized person are more restricted by society's expectations than are those of the lightly socialized person. In a significant amount of naughty behavior. They lie, thefts, they break traffic laws. Yes, sir. We are all sinners. Goof off at work. They hate someone. They say spiteful things. They use some trick to get ahead of the other guy. The over-socialized person cannot do these things, or if he does them, he generates himself in a sense of shame and self-hatred. The over-socialized person cannot even experience without guilt thoughts or feelings that are contrary to the accepted morality. He cannot think unclean thoughts. And socialization is not just a matter of mortality. We are socialized to conform to many norms of behavior that do not fall under the heading of mortality. Am I saying that? Morality? Okay, first of all, this was the Unabomber trial, the manifesto. Now, this is a 35,000 page document. We just read 2 pages. This that I just read you was actually posted in the Washington Post in 95. Because the cops were so... Okay, let's start from his crimes. I'm getting ahead of myself. I guess it kicked me off. I don't know. So he moved into his parents' house after he dropped out of school, and 2 years later in 1971, him and his brother actually purchased some land in Montana. Now, I have no doubt that his brother did not think that Ted would ever hole up in the woods for 20 years and commit all of these gruesome murders. He moved to the remote cabin in 71. Now, let's not forget that would have been before the VCR, before the computer by IBM, and before the walk-in cassette player. But when he was at school in the 60s, he was still saying the same thing. So he saw things coming down the pipeline, and he was able to predict things because of how smart he was. Now, this was in 71, he moves to the cabin, and in 72, all of these technological advancements start coming out, the VCR, the cassette tape, other things, the computer. And he lived a very simple life with little to no money out here in the middle of Montana in the woods. And the only place that he really went to was the library and to the store to get food. Now, he did work odd jobs, and that didn't pay the bills, so his family actually started to financially support him. He wanted to become self-sufficient and be able to live off the land. He wanted to live autonomously. That's another one. Autonomously. I did say it right. With the freedom, yeah. So, with freedom to act independently. He was more of a minimalist, like he didn't need much to get by, and he thought that it was bad for the environment. That was another huge concern, was the environment. He said that we were killing animals, we were killing trees, and that it would lead to the world collapsing. That it would lead to animals dying and going extinct. The rivers and oceans would be polluted. So he didn't have a car or anything, but he actually just bicycled around town. He would bicycle to the library, bicycle back home. At one point, he ended up getting his typewriter. And actually, something that stood out to me is the area of Montana that he was in. This was actually very common. People would move to Montana and they would live off the grid. No one had power or running water in this area. So it was not strange for Ted to be up on the mountain by himself with no power or running water, because everybody lived like that at this time. It was 1971. Got some of my eye again. The only thing that he had in his cabin, I'll show you guys a picture of it. It's kind of eerie. The only thing he had in there was chairs, a cot. This was the cabin that he would be arrested at. I mean, it looks eerie, doesn't it? I'm sorry that you don't understand what we do here, but we're talking about the psychological, profile of Ted. But you can be gone. Bye. Thanks for coming. So he had a bed, 2 chairs, just storage trunks, a gas stove, and a lot of books. Starting in 75, Kaczynski performed acts of sabotage, including arson and booby trapping against developments near his cabin. Unfortunately, because, Google ain't worth a damn, they're bought and paid for by the left. Let's go to DuckDuckGo. I want to see what he did to those developments. So these people were coming in. It was like a logging company or like a development company, and they were cutting down all the trees, running off all the wildlife, which is what we see today, which is not okay. And he had a huge problem with industry, he didn't like big corporations. He didn't like the industrialization of America. That's even a word. I mean, it's the same 5 articles that come up. Tell me that they are rewriting history without telling me that they are rewriting history. It doesn't matter where you go. You can't find anything about his early years. You can't find out what he did to these developers. You can't find out. I guess I need to go to the library, because I bet there's some old books from the 1950s, 60s, 70s, and 80s that has all the information I need. It's just crazy how the internet, we thought the internet was going to make us smarter. No, it makes us dumber. We've lost information. We've lost tools. We've lost everything. The history. All of the history is gone. So it just says that arson and booby trapping against the developments near his cabin. Now, something that I do want to note is that he fell into Scientology. He also dedicated himself to reading about Scientology and the political philosophy, including the works of Jacqueline's. It became Ted's Bible. The Technological Society became Ted's Bible. And this Technological Society is a book on the subject and techniques by French philosopher, theologian, and Scientologist. Originally published in French in 1954 and translated to English in 1964, the central concept defining a technological society is technique. Technique is different from machines. Technology or procedures for attaining an end. In our technological society, technique is the totality of methods rationalized, arrived at having absolute efficiency in every field of human activity. And Ted actually said in 1998 that when he read this book for the first time, he was delighted, because he thought, here's someone who's saying what I've already been thinking. So Ted's father would end up dying in 1990. Hold on, wait a second. So Ted's father was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer in 1990 and held a family meeting without Ted later that year to map out their future. On October 2nd of 1990, Ted's father shot and killed himself in his home. All right, let's talk about his crimes, the bombs. Between 1978 and 1995, Kaczynski mailed or hand-delivered a series of increasingly sophisticated bombs that killed 3 people and injured 23 others. So these bombs actually had some initials on them. That it was FC, and Ted said that it was the Freedom Club. That the initials stood for Freedom Club. He purposely left misleading clues on the devices and took extreme care in preparing them to avoid leaving fingerprints. Fingerprints found on some of the devices actually didn't match him at all. And here's the thing. Going back to schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia. People with paranoid schizophrenia do not have the forethought to plan bombings like this. They can't. Sorry, you guys. If you've already been getting on my nerves, you're getting blocked. People with paranoid schizophrenia would never have been able to pull this off, much less evade cops for 17 years. I feel like they said that he was paranoid schizophrenic, so people didn't believe him. Seriously. He showed no signs of schizophrenia. Why they deemed him that? But I can assure you, anyone with paranoid schizophrenia does not have the rationality to commit crimes as he did. He evaded the FBI, the CIA, everybody for 17 years. So in May of 1978 at Northwestern University, this is not, this ain't gonna work. I don't like this. I don't like it. I don't know what's going on today, but why does my Wi-Fi never work? Okay, here we go. Now I got a timeline. Much better than Wikipedia that ain't worth a damn. May 25th of 78, a package is found under a parking lot at the University of Illinois in Chicago with a return address for Professor Buckley Christ at Northwestern University. So what he was doing was he left this package as it becomes evident to FBI investigators over time that the Unabomber often addresses packages in a manner so that the return address is the ultimate recipient of the bomb. Right there, that level of manipulation and forethought does not scream paranoid schizophrenic. It screams premeditation and being in your right frame of mind. May 26th of 78, there's another package, and it explodes. A lot of these people lost fingers, lost eyes. 1, 2, 3. So he had 4 or 5 bombings in 78. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let me be clear what this is. This is an explosive device that has shrapnel in it. So it's going to be screws, bolts, screws that go in the wall. And it looks like a pipe. And when it detonates, all of the screws and bolts on the inside fly out as shrapnel and goes through people. And it'll absolutely kill you, if not disfigure you and kill you at the same time. So he had 3 bombs in 79. And there was one that was on a plane. The bomb, equipped with a barometer and measurable altitude, explodes as the plane reaches 34,000 feet. Smoke fills the cabin and the pilots are forced to make an emergency landing near Washington. 18 passengers were treated on the scene for smoke inhalation, and baggage compartments is damaged by fire, resulting in the explosion. The FBI later attributes the bomb to a Unabomber. God, this is horrific. He was trying to take that plane down. That was not a simple bombing. That was, we're going to take this plane down. I want to be clear. And it looks like a package arrives at the home of United Airlines President Percy Wood. Several days later, once again, let's not forget that he absolutely hated anyone that was polluting on the earth. He wanted to save the animals. He wanted to save the trees. He wanted to save Mother Earth. Pilots, American Airlines, I wonder how much pollution they've, how many holes they've put in the ozone layer. So this explains why he was trying to kill pilots. So he ended up mailing a bomb, to Professor Patrick C. Fisher at the Pennsylvania State University. A secretary at the Penn State forwards the package to Vanderbilt University. Remember, he would do that mental manipulation where he would put forwarding addresses on packages and mix stuff up so that it would be mailed from one university to another university, so it's harder to find out where it came from. The package blew up. It seriously injured her face, arms. So through 85, he did 5 bombings, 87, 88. And in July of 1988, it looks like he reached out to a mental health professional requesting psychiatric counseling. Now, this would have been in between his bombings, and he specifies that he would prefer to conduct counseling by writing letters rather than speaking in person. At this point, he would have been isolated for around 10 years. In July of 91, he writes another letter in an attempt to seek some sort of counseling, and details his lack of friends and an absence of social contact, as well as describing a perceived lack of social skills, self-confidence, and other traits to lend to his isolation. It's so sad. So he continues to bomb and kill people, 3 people, and injure 23 others. And come the 90s, the FBI had really amped up looking for him. They had whole divisions that were dedicated to trying to catch Ted. They didn't know that it was Ted. They didn't know who it was because they're dumb. And they will forever be dumb. They're the FBI. So in 95, they received a letter from him saying, the letter said that they were going to blow up an airliner flying out of the Los Angeles airport during the next 6 days. At this point, he starts to taunt them in the 90s. He's corresponding with newspapers. He's corresponding with the FBI. He's sending them taunting letters. He's saying, ha, 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 you haven't caught me, blah, 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 essentially. Not really, but essentially. Some of the bombs were actually detonated. Some of them were not, and they went off injuring and killing people. But the ones that they were able to detonate, even through collecting the bomb, dismantling the bomb, and inspecting the bomb, they still couldn't find out any information. He was so smart. He never left fingerprints. He never left anything that was identifiable. None of the parts of the bomb could be linked back to any kind of hardware store or Lowe's or anything like that. They didn't even have Lowe's back then, I don't think. But you know what I mean? Like, they could not figure out who this guy was. And, you know, they wrote him off as crazy. I mean, clearly, if you're going to murder somebody, you've got some screws loose. But I can't help but empathize with everything that he said and how it's come true. I just don't think that he suffered from schizophrenia. I will never believe that. I think that they said that he did because it fit their agenda at the time. This would have been, by 96, the last thing that companies wanted was anyone talking down about technology, because they want their products sold. So was this more of a political, you know, was oh, there we go. Sorry. I think there was a lot of politics when it came to Ted. So in February of 96, David, who was Ted Kaczynski's older brother, I do believe, his wife saw a news article or something, and she recognized Ted's writing. She went to David and she said, David, I think this is your brother. I think the Unabomber is your brother. And David began contact with the FBI and indicated that his belief was that his brother might be the Unabomber. And Ted, David told them that him and Ted owned this property in Montana, and that it was a cabin out in the woods, and that Ted had been out there for approximately 20 years at that point, completely isolated. At this point, the only time that David had even talked to Ted was through a letter that was years prior. Like, they were not even talking to Ted once Ted moved to the wilderness. And here's my thing. I wholeheartedly believe that they wanted him to move to the wilderness. I feel like he was problematic for the family. I feel like David, the mother, and the father wanted to be done with Ted because they couldn't deal with Ted, because they couldn't relate to Ted. And so they agreed to help Ted buy this cabin in the woods, and they supplied him with money for 20 years to keep him there. I feel like the family was wrong. When you are dealing with a person that is antisocial to the point that they are incapable of even talking to a woman, you need to bring them out of their shell. You have to be the normal in the family and say, whoa, Ted, it's imperative that you build personal relationships. It's imperative that you find a girlfriend. It's imperative, you know? And they didn't. They gave him the means and money to isolate himself completely in the woods. And that's what he did. And then his mind turned into his soul. So in April, a few months after, and there was, I just got to say that there was reward money that David turned down. David said that he didn't want the reward money. In April, February, March, April, 2 months after, David called in a tip to the FBI hotline at the, advisement of his wife. Ted was arrested at his Montana cabin. He was charged with possessing the components of a bomb based on evidence found in his cabin, and it wasn't just a bomb, y'all. The whole cabin was outfitted. I mean, the inside of his cabin looked like a manifesto in itself. There was bomb equipment everywhere, his computer, ink, the 35,000-page manifesto, plus an additional copy. The entire cabin was full of bomb-making equipment and his mind. You know what I mean? The walls of that cabin were covered with the inside of his mind. Now, he was asked when he was arrested on April 4th of 96 if he was mentally impaired, and he said no. It was only the psychologist in the prison system that said that he was paranoid schizophrenic. Never before. Now, and mind you, he was a test subject for 4 or 5 years at his first college. I think it was, y'all know. So, you know, he wouldn't even have qualified for that study if he was paranoid schizophrenic, first of all, because they would have been evaluated psychologically pre-hand before that study. Also, he never had any family history of paranoid schizo. He had no history of paranoid schizo. It was only when he was arrested and he was sent to trial that they tried to say that he was paranoid schizo. So he pled not guilty to charges. I think he was so smart, he went insane. Oh, wow. Wow. So the FBI was saying to David, the brother of Ted Kaczynski, you have to take this money, you have to take this money, you have to take this money. And David said, if you make me take this money, I'm giving it to the families of the victims of my brother. How sweet. It does not outline if he would receive the money and if he gave it away. Listen to this. I find this interesting. For a second time in a week, Ted interrupts his trial when he went to court and asks the judge to allow him to represent himself. In a surprising decision, he allows Ted to do so, providing that he can prove himself competent. Ted agrees to an examination by the mental health experts as one method of providing his competence. The judge gives both sides a day to select mutual chosen experts for the exams. At the end of the day, in a bizarre twist, reports are confirmed that Ted tried to hang himself with his underwear in his cell the previous night. Red marks on his neck and the missing underwear brief lead reporters and the U.S. Marshals to this conclusion. Prison officials announce he will be put under a 24-hour supervision and placed on a heart monitor. And he was actually, what? Yo, Sally Johnson. Oh my God. They sent him to Buckner, North Carolina, which is a mental hospital. And then this is when they start saying he was crazy? I mean, obviously, Brooke, he killed people. He was crazy. He wanted to represent himself in court. And there's a 24-hour period of time, and then all of a sudden he becomes suicidal? Bullshit. I'll never believe it. I'll never believe it because I know how the court system works. They did this so he couldn't represent himself, in my opinion. They tried to make it look like he killed himself, and he didn't. It was a suicide attempt, and actually he did. We'll get into that in a minute, but I'll never believe it. I'll never believe it. It's too easy. It's too easy. He was going to represent himself, and then with this attempted suicide, less than 12 hours, he asked the court to represent himself, and less than 12 hours later, y'all want to say he tried to kill himself? Do you know how easy that is to fake? You only need 1 or 2 prison guards, honey. You only need 1 or 2 prison guards. That is so easy to fake. Epstein, hello. I'll never believe it. I feel like... I feel like there's so many layers to this case that I can't even do in one video, but like, I'll never believe it. The last thing they wanted him doing was, the last thing they wanted was that manifesto getting into the public's hands, first of all. Second of all, he hated his attorney and wanted to fire him. and the judge agrees to let him, represent himself, and then supposedly he tries to hang himself. See, for those that don't know, that would halt the court, that would stop the court. Because he tries to hang himself, the court would automatically deem him incompetent to represent himself because of that. So how convenient for the court, because he's smarter than everybody else in there. How convenient for the court. And then they ship him off to Butner, North Carolina, to a psychologist, to a mental hospital. Butner. They did, that's in my home state. I've been there. I went there when I was a child. The first time I went there, I was 5. Then I went when I was 6. And, yeah. Love that. Love that for me. It's just crazy that they can just rewrite history. I'll never believe he was a paranoid schizo. So it says, almost immediately after being convicted, Kaczynski began to serve his life sentences without the possibility of parole. Y'all hear that? Y'all, there's like 15 birds on top of my car. Oh my God. They all landed on the top of my car. I don't know what it is about this black truck, but they can see their reflection, and they like to stand on the mirrors, and then they peck at my windows. Sorry. He was at the A.D. Florence prison in Colorado. And he would actually go on to help the FBI in several other cases because he was so smart. He befriended 2 different people. Hold on. Other bombers. But I also read that the FBI would come to him and say, hey, other bombers, they would say, hey, how would somebody do this? Or why would somebody do this? And Ted be like, oh, let me help you with that. It's just crazy that even after he was arrested, the FBI would go ask him for information on other cases that they were trying to solve. That's how smart he was. He also befriended other bombers. In his early imprisonment, Ted befriended Ramazi Youssef and Timothy McVeigh, the perpetrators of the 93 World Trade Center bombings and the 95 Oklahoma City bombing, respectively. They discussed religion, politics, and formed a friendship in which lasted until McBaughn's execution in 2001. And Ted said, I like McVeigh. I imagine that most people would like him, assuming that only Oklahoma City bombing was intended as a protest against the U.S. government in general and against the government's actions at Waco in particular. I will say that I think the bombing was a bad action because it was unnecessary and inhumane. Not a bomber telling another bomber that his actions were inhumane. I just don't believe he was insane. I just agree with so much he says. For instance, the moral code of our society is to demand that no one can think, feel, or act in a completely moral way. For example, we are not supposed to hate anyone. Yes, yet almost everyone hates somebody at some time or another. Whether he admits it to himself or not, some people are so highly socialized that the attempt to think, feel, and act morally imposes a severe burden on them. That's another thing I was thinking about. Elon and other people with high IQs such as Jordan Peterson and Elon Musk, We've seen them break down mentally on stages because of the high levels of empathy and compassion that they hold. When people are this smart, when we're talking about 160 to 180 IQs, they actually hold a level of empathy and compassion that most people don't, in my opinion. Now, that can go the opposite way, too. They can be heartless assholes as well. But, so he did receive the reward money and give it to the victims and the victims' family. That's good. That shows a lot about how David was raised. And I don't find any family history of psychological, physical, or sexual abuse with these boys. I find it interesting that the only claim of about the possibility of gender reassignment with Ted was through the Wikipedia page. I find that very interesting. Believe that if you want. I don't believe for a moment. And I do believe that if he went in somewhere and he was saying that he wanted to change from a boy into a girl, that he was simply doing it just to be able to talk to that psychologist. I really feel like he knew. I feel like he knew how bad technology was going to be for the world. I feel like he knew that it was evil. I feel like he knew, he could see where leftist policies were leading to. I feel like he was ahead of his time, and I feel like if he wouldn't have isolated himself for 20 years, that there's a good chance that he would have done phenomenal things. Think about all of the great fight he could have did if he wasn't isolated. He could have spoke out against technology. He could have spoke out about socialism and stuff. Like he could have done great things. It's sad. It really is, because he was one of the most brilliant people. I mean, he was a mathematician. It's just sad. I'm not saying it's right. It was absolutely wrong. He was wrong, and he deserved to go to prison. But just the first 3 points of the manifesto that I read you, does anything sound like it's a lie? Yeah, that's what I thought. And, once again, this is going back to when technology was becoming a thing. So you have all of these, the commercialized side of that, wanting to produce these mass production VCRs, CD players, computers. The world was changing. And I think that Ted was smart enough to see that this was not a good thing. And I think that if he was alive today, he'd probably have a damn heart attack with all of us running around with damn smartphones and computers shoved up our asses. Not out here making normal relationships, but instead walking around like this all day long. I mean, I just think that he was a very smart man that was wrote off as freaking crazy when there's no scientific evidence to prove that he was schizophrenic. Nothing. I don't think he was schizophrenic. I think he was plagued with truth. I think that he was overburdened with the world's problems. Elon and Jordan, if you know them like I do, you know that they are overburdened with the world's problems. And I can't imagine what it's like to have a mind that is that fucking smart. Listen, I am not a very smart woman, but my mind is going 1,000,000 miles a minute at all times. So I can't imagine what it must be like to have an IQ of 160 to 180. Your mind never stops. It never stops. I read an article that was talking about how when you're that smart, you pick up all of this information and it's hard to filter out what you actually need to keep with you. Things come at you. Speaking of which, I wanted to talk about that. An IQ, the left is trying to get rid of IQ. They don't want, because they're testing below 70. No, I'm joking. A lot of people on the leftist side want to disqualify IQ. They want to completely wipe the IQ out of the science spectrum. IQ is science, and IQ is the test to rate the speed at how quickly you pick up or handle information, how fast you are handling situations. IQ is the measure of processing speed at rate of understanding. And IQ is to test for intelligence. Now, the IQ became a big thing back in 1904, and we have used it since because it works. It's a way for us to test how smart people actually are. It's a series of questions, typically patterns that you have to turn around and match. I'm sure most of you have taken an IQ test. And, you know, a lot of people, because they score lowly on these tests, they want to write these tests off as being insufficient. And that's actually not the case. And I understand that testing low, you know, when I tested what I tested, I actually thought that I was going to test much lower. I was surprised. I understand how if it would have been lower, that might have made me feel some type of way. And I want y'all to know that the reason that they are trying to end science, the reason that there is a war on science from the left, is because historically they don't like the results they're seeing when they take these tests. And it's unfortunate, but these tests work. You know, psychologists have used these tests for over a century now, and it is imperative that we keep science alive. The DSM, IQ, these personality tests that we have through psychologists, these things are imperative to mental health services and imperative to the future of this country, without a doubt. And I feel like Ted could have done amazing things had he not isolate himself. Becoming a hermit crab and going into complete isolation is not good for the human psyche. The fact that he was already incapable of making human connections and feelings, human connections with people, I feel like his parents and his family let him down by allowing him to buy this property in Montana. And I know he was a grown-ass damn man by then. But once again, as family, we have responsibilities. It was his mother and father's responsibility to tell him, absolutely not, you're not going to isolate in the damn woods. You'll go crazier. But, his father was a sausage farmer, for God's sakes. I highly doubt he knows anything about the human psychology, human psyche. It's sad. I just feel like that they wrote him off as crazy and they wanted to get rid of him, his own family. That's why they allowed him to move from Chicago all the way to Montana by himself, and they supplied him with money for 20 years. He didn't work. He lived off the land. He made bombs. He wrote his manifesto, and that was his whole life for 20 years. I'm just here to tell you that a paranoid schizophrenic is not going to devote their life to trying to save humanity. And I know he was killing people too. And that's the crazy part about this whole case is like, here he is trying to help humanity, but here he is killing humanity. It's a hard one, you guys. It's a hard one. I just, I see how everybody failed him. He's over here, even as he was committing these gruesome pipe bombings and blowing people to shreds with shrapnel, screws, and bolts. He's writing a psychologist begging for help, saying, I don't know how to have relationships. I don't know how to make friends. I'm isolated. I need help. And there at the end, it had gotten so bad that he could not even go see a psychiatrist. He had to correspond with one, and that's how I know that it was so bad at the end, because when he was in college, he was going from class to class to experiment to experiment. It was only when he left college and he started isolating that he could no longer even talk to someone in person, and he states that in his letter in 95 to his psychiatrist. He says, I would rather correspond than visit you in person. That's a telltale sign that he was incapable of even having human connection at that point because of how long he had been isolated, in my opinion. I will never believe that he was paranoid schizo. I believe that he was plagued with the problems of the world, and he went about things a completely wrong way. And I feel like he got off on the killing because he was angry. I feel like there came a point when he moved to that cabin and he made up his mind. Like, you know, the whole time he was at university, he had his beliefs. He stood on ground and he said, this stuff is wrong. And people called him crazy. People made him an outcast because he didn't believe in leftist ideologies. Go figure. He said that schools were corrupt, that professors were corrupt, that they were brainwashing students. It's all in the manifesto if you want to go read it. It's just crazy how everything he said came to fruition. And he was dealing with that shit back then, in the 60s. The same problems we got now, they was having back then, apparently. Ain't nothing changed. Same shit, different day. It's just crazy to see how Einstein, he was abusive. Fun fact. He completely ignored his family and was completely self-involved and self-obsessed with his work. He wasn't able to have normal interpersonal relationships, just like Ted, just like yesterday. Who did we talk about yesterday? Just like him. There's something going on with high IQs and interpersonal relationships, the lack thereof of interpersonal relationships. I'm seeing that a lot of people with high IQs actually have a detachment from the rest of society, which is really sad, because we should put those people on a pedestal and give them the opportunity to showcase their talents and their brilliance. And we used to back in the day. Now we don't, now we're getting dumber. We've de-evolved. And Ted said that we would. He said that we would! It's just crazy. I feel crazy, y'all, like empathizing with this man. I'm just here to tell you that anybody that hates the world is not going to devote their whole life to trying to save it, even though he was killing people. I know, it's crazy. He said that technology would tear us apart. It would destroy us from the inside out as a country, around the world, that it will become the sole focus of everyone. And where was the lie? Where was the lie? It's just crazy how he made sense. And I don't believe that he was suffering from severe mental health problems like the prison said. I feel like that was something for them to probably either A, receive money for, because they do get grants. They get federal funding for their mental health patients. Or they wanted to write him off as crazy so nobody would pay attention to what he was saying, because at this time, the technological advancements was lucrative for this country. And also, he was speaking out about leftist policies and the brainwashing of children in schools. So if they don't like that now, they definitely didn't like it back then, Yeah, I feel bad for him. I feel like his parents. I feel like first of all, he was so smart that he started Harvard at 16, and they actually gave him money to go to school. And I feel like, from what I learned about the family, his parents were pushing him to do that. Like, they wanted him out of the house. And once again, you can't find anything on their family history. So from what Google says, it was a normal upbringing. I don't know about that, y'all. I don't know about that. The fact that they pretty much abandoned him at college at 16 and sent him off, there was no questions asked. You're going. Pack your bags. Bye. And then he came home for a brief period of time, and they made him go back to school. So he went back to school, and then eventually he transferred to Berkeley, and that's really when California, in the 1960s and 70s, I'm pretty sure Illinois, Chicago was probably a Republican place, we can see. But California has notoriously been, especially the colleges. That's where all leftist ideology actually started, was in the colleges. So this would have been the time that leftist ideology was presenting itself, and it would have been at Berkeley, which is crazy. And so I'm wondering if that stint at Berkeley where he dropped out, if that's what made this psychological switch in him to violence and anger, because when he was at the other schools, he excelled. He didn't have these problems. And then he goes to Berkeley, and he has a lot more problems. I mean, he did have problems at the other colleges. He was known as an outcast. He stayed to himself. He was very antisocial. But it wasn't like when he went to Berkeley. That's what I was going to see. In 1968, was Chicago a Republican place? Illinois Brook. It says it's Democratic. $1968, maybe that, what's crazy is to have a man out here talking about traditionalism and minimalism and, living off the land, and he was, he thought that we needed to stick with what we knew. It's crazy to see that he actually has a lot of right-wing beliefs, even though he was completely incapable of forming any relationship with woman or girl. There was one student that said he didn't think he had ever saw Ted talk to a woman. In Illinois, on November 5th, 1968, they had their United States presidential election. Voters selected 26 electors, blah, 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 blah. Richard Nixon, Hubbard, and George Wallace. Who won? Nixon? Oh, wow, I was right. It was mainly Republican. So I was right. I had this feeling. Let's look at California in 68. And he went there in 72. Was California Democratic in 1972? So he went from a primarily Republican state across the country, honey, because Chicago ain't Illinois. Listen, y'all. I don't know. It's somewhere over here. If this is the map, it's somewhere over here. He went clear across the country. Oh, it wasn't either. Look at that. It was a Republican. Most of it was Republican. But still, though, at this time, after the 1960s, there was this sexual liberation that people, they were liberated sexually, and people, I'm sure that Berkeley, let's look up the history of Berkeley in 72, because I'm sure he was shell-shocked by what he saw from Chicago. And he's even stated his time at Berkeley was absolute torture. So I don't know what he went through at Berkeley, but I do believe that it had a profound impact on him. And he even stated that when he was in Michigan under that Dr. Murray, that had a significant impact on him. He was only 16 years old when he went to Harvard. It was Harvard. He went to Harvard, and this doctor was experimenting on him. And there was over 21 students that was experimented on. Everything from electric shock therapy to potentially LSD. We don't know exactly. And what is crazy, California, Berkeley. Yeah. The University of California, Berkeley has a history of leftism activism. In 1964, the university administration banned political activity on campus. 64. 1964 is when they become a liberal college. He quit in what, 68? 72? Something like that. So Baby Boy went from a highly Republican area to a Democratic college, and I have no doubt that it impacted him. And I wonder if Harvard... My stomach hurts. I don't know what this is. It says Western parties from socialism to neoliberalism. Leftist-leaning political parties play an important role as representatives of the poor and disempowered. They once did so by promising protections from the forces of the capital and marketing tendencies to produce inequality. But in the 1990s, they gave up on protection, asking voters to adapt to market-driven world. Meanwhile, new extreme parties began to promise economic protections of their own. This is out of Harvard. Sorry. Was Harvard, does anybody know if they were ever a right-wing school? Yes, because Ted Kaczynski was smarter than Elon Musk and Einstein. That's the sad part. That's the sad part. And actually, I thought that Jordan Peterson's was going to be right up there with Elon's, and I was shocked that it was only 147. I mean, it's not only 147, but like Elon's is 155 to 160. That's crazy. And I can't figure out the history of Harvard's voting. And every school, I know you're like, what? They don't vote. It's not like the college has a vote. No, but every college is absolutely left-leaning or right-leaning, and their school's structure is based around whatever side they own. And it's been that way for centuries. It's unfortunate. Politics should not have a place in the classroom, in my opinion. Schools should be ran with God front and center. Now, should there be serious discussions about politics in classes? Absolutely. But what I'm saying is the school should not be ran on the backbone of a political party. That's the problem. That's why we have children out here brainwashed, cutting their penises off. It started in the schools. It's no secret where this transgender bullshit started. It started in the schools. It started in the universities. And matter of fact, Ted talks about that in his manifesto. The history of Harvard began in 1636. Jesus. But we didn't even get here till 1776. Well, no, we got here earlier than that. That's just when. Jesus. It was formed in Massachusetts Bay and the one of the original 13 colonies. I'm like, how did Harvard get started before the United States? So, Harvard College, founded in Newtown, was actually a college started in one of the first 13 colonies when we landed here. 2 years later, in 1638, the town's name was changed to Cambridge in honor of Cambridge, England, where many of the colony settlers had attended University of Cambridge. Harvard University is the oldest institution of higher learning in the United States. Sad what it's become. No, not Harvard, starting out with God front and center, only to lose it 300 years later. What? By 1636, some 7,000 people had migrated to New England, and Harvard was founded in anticipation of needing training for clergy for the new Commonwealth, a church. In the wilderness, Harvard was established that year by a vote. So it was a church. The school was originally a church in the wilderness, made for immigrants. Wow. What history. On March 13th, 1639, the college was named Harvard College in honor of I think it's Puritan. Puritan? It's a group of people, a race of people, an ethnic background. In honor of these people that immigrated to America to become clergymen, they named the university Harvard because of John Harvard. He was one of the students of the school. He had a library of 400 books to start the school with. And he was a clergyman for the school. Interesting. I thought we did nothing but come and steal land. In 1640, Harvard College established the Harvard Indian College, which educated Native American students. It was only attended by a handful of students, only one of whom graduated. How sad. But, these people have been isolated over here with no social skills as well, other than with their own tribe. So it's no surprise that, and I'm sure that was one of those things back then. If you were Indian and you wanted to go hang out with the white man to learn all day long, that your tribe would disown you. I'm just guessing, but I understand the social impact of, how your family would treat you back then. Things were very slavery, honey, okay? People were segregated, and people were hostile and didn't get along, and we're over here stealing land, trying to act like we can educate other motherfuckers. Like, come to our school. We'll educate you dumbasses. Like, sounds like America. Sounds like America. So, it's crazy because a lot of their history, it goes back to God. Harvard actually got their start through God. So he replaced pagan classic books by Christian authors and ethics classes to maintain discipline in the college. This was the Puritan guy. And actually in 1692, another guy, he was the 6th president of Harvard at this place. At this time, he replaced all of the pagan books with Christian books. Students were required to observe rules of pietas decorum, inconceivable in the 19th century, and ultimately to prove their fitness for the bachelor's degree by showing that they could read the original of the Old Testament and New Testament in Latin tongue and resolve them logically. Whoa! So, you had to know the Bible inside and out to receive your degree. You had to know it in the Latin tongue, honey. Bring this back. Why are we not teaching this now? How smart. You're learning the Bible, you're learning English, and you're learning Latin tongue. Wow, this is so crazy. So, the town of Dedham was founded in 1636, the same year as the college. The first minister of the first church of parish was John Allen. He served as an overseer in every ministry through 1861, was connected to the university. Given its population and modest means, the support from the community provided to the college was generous. During Harvard's early years, the town of Cambridge maintained order on campus and provided economic support. And this Puritan minister had direct oversight of Harvard and ensured the orthodox of its leadership. By 1700, Harvard was strong enough to regulate and discipline its own people, and to a large extent, the direction in which support and assistance flowed was reversed. Harvard now providing financial support for local economic expansion, improvements to public health, and construction of local roads, meeting houses, and schools. So that's when you went off track, the 1700s. We switched from educating students to getting involved in politics. So the early motto of Harvard was Verista Crisco et. It means in Latin, truth for Christ and the church. It's just crazy that they started out with God. And look at them now. They've fallen so far. Their literal motto was truth in Christ and the church. That was the 18th century. At the end of Mather's presidency in 1701, marked by the start of a long struggle at Harvard between orthodoxy and liberalism. Ah! So in 1708, John Leverett, Harvard's first specular president, was appointed as Harvard's 7th president. John left the curriculum largely intact, but sought to keep the college independent of overwhelmingly influence of any single Christian domination. So things were good until 1708, when they had their 7th president come in. He wanted to keep the college without any Christian. He didn't want God in the school. My belly's wrong. Same. So it looks like there was another guy that came in and he wanted to bring God back, and Harvard was like, no, and they've historically, slowly but surely, slipped away from God and the foundation that they were started on, which is disheartening. But I understand now what Ted was saying in parts of his manifesto as I'm reading this. What is going on? Better you than me. I hope you're not dying, God. Whoever they're going to pick up, make sure they live, please. So it's only, I mean, when you get to the current history, it's nothing about God, nothing about why they got their start. Go figure. That's probably why they're failing. Yo, I gotta go. I gotta use the bathroom. I don't know what's wrong with me. I gotta pee. I can't. My Wi-Fi is not working here, and it's really making me sad. At least that phone works. But we might talk this afternoon. I've been doing research for something else. Oh, God. I just empathize with this guy so bad because I guess, Stephanie told me the other day, she said that because of foster care that I move around a lot because I moved around as a child, but also she told me that I empathize with everyone because of the fact that I grew up in foster care. She said that adds a layer of empathy to a person. Well, she said that it can go one of two ways. You either hate everybody or you empathize with them. So I'm glad that I have the ability to empathize with people, even if they're horrible and they've killed, 3 people and mangled 23 others. I see both sides to everything. And I feel like Ted needed guidance between 5th and 7th grade. And him himself even said that was a pivotal moment in his life, that he missed out on so much because they kept skipping him ahead. And then also his school at Berkeley in Michigan and Illinois, I don't think that those were positive on him. It's just really sad because he could have done great things. You know how rare it is to be born with a 167 IQ? He was smarter than Einstein. Think about that for a minute. He was smarter than Einstein. I think a lot of people fail to realize that people that have that level of IQ, they also, a lot of them struggle emotionally. Because they're able, imagine being smarter than any doctor in any hospital across the United States at 12. He was smarter than every teacher, no matter what grade he was in. I'm talking about a 4th grader, smarter than the teacher that's teaching him whatever she's teaching him. This is something he struggled with his entire life. But not only that, being that smart, you notice inconsistencies in society and in people. And it can't be easy to struggle with that. And I think that other people that struggle with that is Elon and absolutely Jordan. People don't know what they do. You know what I mean? And to be someone that recognizes why people tick, it's got to be hard to deal with that. And I think Ted went about it in the wrong way. And it's sad because he could have done great things. He could have been phenomenal. But to spend 20 years trying to bring awareness to the industrial corruption of the world and technology, you've got to care about humanity in some way. I know he was killing people, but no one devotes their entire life to trying to bring an awareness to a situation if they don't care. If he didn't have empathy and compassion, he wouldn't have wrote a 35,000-page manifesto 5 or 6 times, Like, I empathize with him. I empathize because everything he said has essentially come true, unfortunately. Unfortunately. He believed that that we didn't need to over-commercialize everything, that we were destroying the earth, that we were killing the animals, that we were polluting the water. Look at this place. Was he wrong? I mean, was he wrong? The overdevelopment of the world has caused pollution. Absolutely, it does every day. We're killing the coral reefs. We have animals going extinct. That's why you see deer running around damn neighborhoods. There's nowhere for them to go. So I empathize with him, and I don't believe that he was a paranoid schizo, and I never will. I think that they said that because they wanted to create a picture. once again, he went against everything that they were trying to do at the time, you know, as far as like the world, the economy. He spoke out against what they were trying to do, which was develop and, you know, make technology front and center. So I just find it interesting that people write him off as crazy when he had a lot of validity, there was a lot, I mean, the whole manifesto is essentially fact. Like, from what I've read, and I haven't read all 35,000 pages, but the 1,000 pages that I've skimmed through, everything he said was fact. And I'm just curious as to how you can predict stuff like that, but he did. But I'm going to go use the bathroom and get my day started. I like to get on here early when the sun comes up because it's cool and I'm not sweating. Come 11 a.m., I'm sweating like a dog in heat. Like, so that sucks. But anyways, we'll talk later and y'all be safe. Bye, y'all.